The CentreSteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the sixth episode of the CentreSteer Podcast. I'm your host, John Constant, sitting across from me.
I'm Harold. I'm addicted to Rovers.
This is Mark. I have a Disco 2 that's still being built up and becoming a new passion.
And I'm Morgan, and I have a Series 388 that I'm in the middle of a frame over on. Unfortunately, doing very little actual rovering until that's done.
So we have no actual update on your frame over then, right?
No, it's I'm down to the last little bit of wiring to remove, but you know.
So there's our update.
Yeah.
What's the bad thing about only having one rover? When it's down, you do no rovering by definition.
Exactly.
And we'll get started with the news. Of course, I always forget to say what vehicle I have. I currently have a Disco 2.
Do you remember which vehicles you have?
Not really. I have a Disco 2, a Series 3 109, and a Defender 110, of which 2 are functional.
And how many does Harold have?
One.
Well, what do you mean by have? Do you mean he actually owns titles, or...
I have possession of one of your semi-functional rovers.
Well, yes. But I suspect Morgan was asking how many do you own?
Oh, that's a number which cannot be computed at this time.
I was actually asking how many of yours he had, but you know.
Oh, he has one of mine.
Exactly.
He should have 2, and then 1 again, because the 109 needs to get fixed, and then I can get it back, and then he can have the 110 to get that properly
I
fixed.
can gain an inch.
Yes. All right.
It's all about the inches in Land Rovers, if you're doing it right.
Speaking of all about the inches, our first news item is sales for August. Sales, as we seem to do every month on a podcast, we find it a very interesting topic. Rover sales are up, I believe, about 30% in August, particularly in China. That's where the big growth is, particularly in the new Range Rover Sport and the new Range Rover itself, the big one. Now, I think this is a combination here of JLR, which is Jaguar Land Rover units. They went up 43%. Specifically, Land Rover was up 18%. They sold 22,447 units in August, over 19,005 units in August of 12. So we're seeing a healthy sales figure.
Apparently also on the Jaguar side of things.
Yes, well, Jag's come out with a couple new models themselves. I guess there's some discussion of them coming out with an SUV also.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled with the notion, but they've got Land Rover. Just stick to what you're good at.
I completely agree. If you want a nice, you want a sport car, you want a saloon car, you want something to cruise down the highway, get your Jag.
And the thing is, I've seen the picture of their idea for the new SUV, and it's dumb. It's an Evoque with a Volvo front end on it.
Is that okay?
That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's another use for the Evoque, which I mean is fine. They've got it, and they can reskin things, and badge engineering being what it is. But the front end design just looks like they're ripping off Volvo now.
And really, when you have the Evoque, why have 2?
Well, yeah.
Especially, the Evoque and the Range Rover Sport look fairly similar.
Well, and the notion of having one division of the company competing directly with another division of the company is just, it's shades of General Motors. And I mean, it was maybe good for them in the 1950s, but it certainly wasn't too good for them a few years ago.
So following along with the success, particularly in China, as I'd mentioned earlier, Land Rover, it's an interesting story. I like the title, Land Rover Stung by Success. So in China, demand is particularly strong, and there is a wait of 9 months for the new Range Rover Sport and a wait of 6 months for the larger regular Range Rover. And reading the article, there's nothing that Land Rover can do because the Solihull factory is running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I think that's 3 shifts. 3 shifts, 8 hours, 24/7. So I just find it, that's good news, I guess. Right?
Well, it's good for Solihull if everybody's working.
And more.
And that's 40% above what they had planned. So it's hard to take up that much extra.
That's more than healthy demand.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were at reasonably high capacity even before they had the 40% increase. So there's just only so much room you can make for the additional sales.
A little interesting side bit of information in this article was that engines are still some of the engines, not all of them, but engines are still supplied by Ford. JLR does make its own 4-cylinder engines, or will, in 2015. But I guess all the other V8s and V6s are coming from Ford themselves, which I think is interesting.
Well, the V8s are coming from Jag.
Okay. But are they partly supplied by Ford, or is that all supplied by Jag?
No, the Jag engine's a Jag engine.
Okay.
So this article must have some incorrect information.
Well, I think the 6 was from Ford. I think that's possible. I don't think they've developed anything of their own, but
or maybe the article is not clear on exactly what Ford is doing.
Yeah, and I think they're getting some stuff from Ford, but and the LR2 was actually based on a Volvo platform back when Ford owned the both of them. So there's a lot of commonality in parts, which I'm all for if it's done right.
And hopefully it's not constraining, production.
Yeah, given that they're at full capacity at Solihull running 3 shifts, I really don't think engine supply is the bottleneck.
Yeah. So along the lines of demand, there's an article coming out of Australia that says Land Rover is committed to a new Defender, which is kind of against what we had talked about last month, where Land Rover was not going to build a new Defender. But I think the distinction is that they're going to build a Defender, but they're not necessarily going to build the DC100 concept. So I think that's what I'm kind of picking up from the articles here, is that, yes, the Defender is critically important. They want to expand the reach of the Defender, particularly because I guess Land Rover's in 177 countries, and not all of them get the Defender, purchase the Defender, particularly in the United States. But they want to grow that demand, especially for the Defender. So what I'm figuring out here is that Land Rover's critical. They do want to build one. They want to build a new one. There's new regulations coming in Europe, not just the United States, that they need to deal with. And so I think you're going to see a new Defender. You may not see the DC100 concept. That's kind of what I'm figuring.
So it seems they're listening to customer demand.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like they're working to have something by 2016, because the new European regulations hit in the end of 2015. So...
Right. I mean, 2016, yeah.
Well, they'd be crazy not to design with that threshold in mind.
Oh, yeah, that's just their hard deadline. And hopefully this time around, like with other models, as long as they make it past the more stringent European standards, it'll be, acceptable to us in the U.S.
Does anybody know what the Chinese standards are? Are they... just a legitimate question, because... with demand being huge in China...
I think it has to have enough wheels to hold it up off the ground, and that's really the only standard they have.
Right. Judging by their smog levels and stuff, I'm not sure how much they worry about
they've built there in just the last few years. I really just don't think they have any standards.
Well, considering how much smog they have, they should have standards that are probably worse than ours.
Should, but don't.
Do we? We don't know.
I don't know.
Does anybody know?
I'm just empirically making an observation that I just don't think they have any.
Right. And we are not taking time out of the podcast to go research. At least I'm not. We can do that for another time.
We should get a Chinese correspondent.
We should get a Chinese correspondent.
There we go.
Yes.
I think anything that meets any of our standards will have no problem passing muster in China.
Yeah. That seems to be clear. But I was just kind of a serious question about... perchance, are their standards higher or close? Do they follow the Europeans? Do they follow the Americans?
Well, the thing is, it's not so much always having a higher standard. It's just if the standard is different, that can be a challenge. And years ago, if you wanted to bring anything into Japan, there were some crazy lighting rules you had to meet. And it wasn't necessarily that much more stringent, but it was different enough that it became costly to make the changes.
Kind of like diesel. The difference between them, the standards are different, not necessarily worse or better, but the fact that they're different made it more challenging for them to produce and have a common world car, as Ford has always wanted to have. So.
Was it China or Japan that was pushing for pedestrian safety in the front end design of vehicles?
I thought those were the Europeans.
Yeah, I think that was Europeans.
I know it's big in Europe, and they talk about it a lot in the UK.
And they have implemented. I mean, there are implemented standards already. Doing that. Some of the designs you've seen. That's one of the problems. I think that's the 16. Now that I think of it, that might be the 16 deadline they're coming up upon. Is that that's why the Defender has that pedestrian issue it needs to deal with, and that's probably why it can't look, flat front. I wonder if that's the 16 deadline.
That could be. A lot of it has to do with the height too. A lot low vehicles have a challenge because it's the height of the bumper, which is kind of interesting given that a lot of the problems that we've had in this country related to the gray market stuff was about height. And back in the 80s, the cars everybody wanted were so low that the headlights weren't high enough. Headlight height was a big thing here, and now bumper height is becoming a big thing over there.
Okay. And that's exactly why the differing standards are so difficult to work around.
Yeah, the world would be a nicer place if everybody could agree on their standards, I guess.
As long as there are standards that the country that had them liked them.
Well, if you could just pick a global standard and it wasn't so ridiculous to build to it. I mean, if you pick one standard for the whole world, then it opens up trade.
If we could just get ourselves to switch over to metric, even that would be a huge start.
Well, we've had the laws on the books for 148 years now or something like that. So it was, 1880s somewhere? 1870s?
I think it was during the Civil War.
Or immediately thereafter that we officially became a metric country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then again, we did it again in 1979.
Well, yeah, we spent all that money on all those road signs, which we promptly tore down. We'll have to put back up again.
I think you could still keep mile per hour. That's okay. When
they do in England. They keep both systems. It's officially a metric country, but they still talk in terms of miles
and miles per hour.
And yeah.
And even gallons.
True, yeah. Of course, they got their own miles per gallon thing going over there because their gallon's different.
And
pick 1 gallon and go with it, people.
Interestingly, theirs is not the imperial gallon. We have the imperial gallon. They have the British gallon or something.
So in addition to Land Rover committing to the Defender, Kahn Design has actually also been petitioning for them to keep the Defender. So I don't know if that had any actual sway, but they are a big aftermarket modifier of many vehicles, but their favorites are definitely Defenders. So it's interesting to see one of the bigger companies in the industry standing up and saying, hey, please keep this for us.
How many units a year do they build?
That I'm not entirely sure.
Because that really kind of, that speaks to how much influence they'd actually have with Land Rover.
That's very true.
And probably also how close they are, how closely they're embedded into Land Rover too.
Yeah, I mean, if you build 10,000 of them, that's one thing. If you only build 10 a year and they're specialized, it's like Land Rover really doesn't care.
Exactly. And my guess is that since they had to write a public letter to Land Rover and do a petition, they probably don't have a whole lot of sway with Land Rover.
If it was public,
Yeah.
I doubt it.
Yeah, if they were a really big customer, they could just make a phone call and make it happen.
Yeah.
Also, but there actually is a petition, I guess, not sure with whom, it's called change.org, and there's a petition to carry on manufacturing the Land Rover Defender past 2015. It's a motoring icon, of British industry design and adaptability. I guess it's probably not too much different than our...
Who wrote that petition? A person or a company?
I don't... it's petitioned by Kahn Design Limited.
Well, there you go.
So they actually... it sounds like they did a similar thing we have in the U.S. where you can petition the president to do something.
Well, change.org is around. There's a lot of petitions in this country through them. But you can tell the difference between one that's properly written and one that somebody threw together at the last minute.
The petition is now closed, and they had 386 supporters.
Oh. Had I known, I could have made it 387.
Yes, but I think probably being British might have helped, but maybe not.
I don't know. Maybe.
It is interesting with Kahn. They do basically all the high-end vehicles. They'll do some kind of a package for them, but I believe they do all Land Rover makes, whereas some others, they only do 1 or 2 of their vehicles.
So you could have a nice kitted-out Freelander?
for some reason you ever wanted that, I guess you could.
Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing. They do Ford, and you might have a couple of guesses on what vehicle, but you'd be wrong. They do the Ford Focus.
Yeah, because isn't that the world cars? Is that the Mondeo?
Oh, it's very common in the rally scene. So
That's true. In Europe, the Focus is big in Europe.
Yeah.
Although I think luxury rally car is kind of self-defeating, but
Yeah.
agreed.
But that Ford Focus ST, that's a nice little vehicle.
well, yeah, I mean it's a little car, but it's a good car, and it is sold worldwide. It is a world car, so there's a lot of them out there. It makes sense that they'd want to at least give it some attention.
It's just interesting to see something like the Focus on a list beside the Bugatti Veyron.
Well, it just tells you if you got money, anything can be pimped.
You're right. So it's an interesting company. I'm sure they do a lot of business, and it does seem predominantly be Land Rover, but they do a little bit of everything. Speaking of Land Rover customizations, there was recently an article out on a Land Rover Defender that was significantly converted into basically a high-end luxury vehicle. Kind of looks like a mix of a Bentley and a first-class seat from an airliner. It's got everything from dual computers, cooler, all white leather. It's very interestingly done, and oddly enough, the customer is a British farmer, and he wanted this to be able to drive around his estate in.
So a farmer wants to drive around in the mud in something that's clad entirely in white?
The floor mats are black, but yes, the seats are all white.
And
Got a feeling he's not getting out to wrestle a cow or anything.
And it's not just white. It's brilliant white.
Blindingly white.
Yes.
Well, that obviates the need for a dome light.
My real concern, however, is the Windows that is actually running the computers that are in the back seats. It's actually looks like Windows 97 or Windows XP.
It looks like XP. It's very nicely done. I just
I really like
kind of like that.
I really like the dome lighting because they have that nice center strip down the center of the truck with the kind of like the halo light effect. I really like that. But
we could do that to yours. Did you also want the quilted white leather ceiling?
No. I do not want the quilted white leather ceiling.
In the
That would cost
here,
a lot extra just to get me to look at it.
It does say it's running Windows 8 in the description here.
It does. You're right. Dimmable mood lighting.
I wonder what the Windows actually controls.
Two medium-sized fold-away tables, drinks cabinet with lead crystal glassware, small refrigerator, dimmable mood lighting, and a complete onboard mobile PC system with Windows 8 software.
I like how one of the stowaway tables is used for a full-size keyboard for the computer.
Oh yeah, that is a full-size keyboard, isn't it?
Well, I don't need that.
Wouldn't you have a pad? Wouldn't it better have like some sort of iPad or Windows Surface?
I still like a good old-fashioned keyboard for when I'm writing.
It does have a trackball on it, at least.
Yeehaw! Shades of 1983.
I always like the good trackball.
Yeah. Flip it over and you got yourself a mouse, just like the way things should be. So that Windows PC is really, it's not controlling any vehicle systems. It's just a PC for people to play with while they're riding.
That's my assumption for what I see here.
That makes more sense to me. I mean, I'd hate to have it controlling things like suspension or climate control or...
No, it looks like things like the seat controls they look like Rover stock controls. There's an audio video system that's definitely different.
Yeah, of course you can buy that stuff aftermarket. So it just sounds like it's been given a whole lot of dressing up, but it hasn't really changed any real systems on board.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. It's mostly cosmetic.
All right, well, I mean, the guy's got his money. If he can afford to do it, why not?
Sure. Maybe he gives tours. of his farm.
Very expensive tours.
Yes.
Well, it doesn't sound all that more gaudy than like the stretched Hummer limousines and stuff.
Which I even see here in Vermont.
It may look very stock on the outside, which I kind of hope it does. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I was surprised that there's no shots of the outside.
In fact, all the windows are blacked out. You can't see anything outside.
So I guess the key is just what they've done inside the thing.
Yeah, that's what leads me to believe the outside's probably fairly stock looking.
Well, actually, that would be kind of the ultimate stealth ride that way. Kind of leave it all beat up and rusty and covered in mud on the outside, and have it be this leather wrapped cocoon environment inside.
I like it from that perspective.
So speaking of Defenders, there's just a fun little interesting video on the interwebs of a Dodge Ram Cummins versus a Land Rover Defender. It's all of a minute and a half, and they do a tug of war, and the Defender wins.
Well, it's, you can't always compete on just horsepower alone. It's like what they tell you in the tractor pull. It's not enough to have horsepower. You got to put it to the ground, and that's really the key. Is the Dodge just can't put the power to the ground as efficiently as the Defender.
Is that torque?
Well, the Dodge has more torque, definitely, but the thing is, it can't get it to the ground. It doesn't have enough traction. It's about being hooked up.
And it's hard to tell what it has on it for tires. It also looked like it might have not been in four-wheel drive.
Yeah. When I was looking at it, it does not look to be in four-wheel drive.
Does it have four-wheel drive?
It should.
Well,
yeah, I'm pretty certain that one does.
Not all the Cummins Dodges do. That's why I say that.
And this took place...
I think they showed that it was four-wheel drive in like the very first shot.
But yeah, some of the others, the rear wheels are definitely spinning forward, but the front are just dragging backwards, rolling backwards.
Right. Yeah, I think if that Dodge was in four low, it would have been not quite the same outcome. Because even on their first pull, I think the Dodge was actually winning.
Oh, it has so much more power. If it's hooked up at all, there's just no chance for the Defender.
And a lot of the comments to that video speak to the same thing. So speaking of Defender videos, there's another one. This one looks supplied by Land Rover itself, and it's the Defender Electric, all-electric Defender, going off-road. And it was pretty interesting because it showed it kind of like the next stage, I guess, in the concept of the all-electric Defender. And they actually took this and put it through its paces and showed the video about it. Showed the engine, quote unquote. The batteries are up where the engine would normally be. And then they showed the interior with some of the new gauges and lights that come on. The nice thing about it is the fact that it's moving to the next stage, to the next phase, if you will, of getting out there. And I think they're also looking to produce an all-electric Defender for kind of more commercial use than, say, for regular, not residential, what are we? It's regular citizens.
Personal use?
Personal use. But I think that's where it's at least going to start, is in the commercial area.
Well, the nice thing about commercial, if you're really looking to do a test bed, if you will, is that you could put a number of them in place in one fleet, and you have much better access to data than, one vehicle with this person and another one with that person, and it's kind of a nice way to do a test in numbers with only one customer.
So a rolling stock all electric is being tested.
Well, that's cool. It's much better than just having pictures. If they actually exist, they're putting some miles on them so they can start moving forward with the program.
And it looks like it's on Land Rover's official test track. So it's a pretty good test track, and it performs well.
This in Solihull we're talking about?
It looks like it, yeah. Okay. It looks like some of the shots I've seen of their test track there.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool facility. I'd like to go someday.
That started back in the 1940s when the Land Rover started. That test track was now it might have been, maybe it was the early 50s, but the idea came from Belgium, where there was another kind of test track idea, and then they took those concepts and moved to Solihull and had their own.
Added their own off-road
And did their own
part of it to it.
Own special testing features, and that's pretty much hasn't changed since. So I've led to believe. I'm still reading that book on that we found our engineer, and I need to pick up the pace on that one. But that was in that book. It was kind of
Well, the nice thing about that is you really don't need to upgrade trees and mud holes very often.
In fact, the more you use it, the better a test track it becomes.
Yeah, self-improving.
Yeah. And it's actually, the video is very nice because when you're watching it, I mean, the Land Rover is just very quiet. So you're only really hearing the drive components spinning.
It still sounds like a Defender in the drivetrain, but yeah, the engine, mine is the engine. It still has that same kind of drivetrain.
Yeah, it's still not quiet.
Oh, it's not quiet. No.
No.
Yeah, you don't have that engine, nor do you have the smoke coming out the back. And
Well, if you got smoke coming out, you got bigger problems.
all electric.
You've got John.
Wait, was that a shot against me?
No, not at all.
No. When I listen again, I'll see if it was. So speaking of electric Defenders, another electric Land Rover is out there, and this is actually a Series 1. So apparently someone has restored a Series 1 from, I don't see the year here, and it's a short wheelbase, all-electric Land Rover Series 1, first of its kind, they say. And they're auctioning it off. And it's being auctioned by Sustainable Nantucket here in the United States, and you can still get yourself a raffle ticket for $100 US, and they are raffling it off on October 21st.
So it's a raffle, not an auction.
It is a raffle.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's correct.
There's only 650 tickets.
Well, that's pretty good odds. And really, even if the electric part didn't work, it's still worth it for the Series 1 parts.
It's a nice-looking Series 1.
And Series 1s, I mean, they're collectible, no matter how you look at it, and the parts are hard to come by. So,
Yep.
And this is a 51, so it was the first year they were exporting to the U.S.
okay. And it was first generation between 48 and 53, so...
So, and I hopefully I may win because I actually bought a ticket. So we'll see what happens. So it's for a good cause.
Well, that's good because when you win, I win.
I'll sell the tape.
Well, you can keep it. Just pay me to work on it.
Oh yeah.
I win.
So moving on to new vehicles, the Discovery is having another facelift at Frankfurt Motor Show. They have revealed some facelifts to the Disco 4. Looks like just front fascia, and to kind of mirror the new Rangy Sport and the regular Rangy, some new headlights, LED daytime running lights, which is all the rage these days.
And the law in some countries.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
What more info? What do you mean?
Well, north of us in Canada, it's been the law there for a long time, daytime running lights.
Oh, daytime running lights.
Yes.
Okay, right. I thought you meant LED.
No, LED is fine, but no, daytime running lights are the law in many countries, and LEDs are just a way to do it more efficiently.
I'm one of those people against daytime running lights, especially when it causes extra glare, and it's just annoying to me.
It's confusing, in my opinion, but
It further confusing. Well, the other thing that bothers me about it is that people forget that their lights are not on.
Correct.
And they're in daytime running light. So when it gets a little dusk or the weather gets bad, they overcast, and maybe a little bit of rain, they forget to turn their lights on, even if it's in the running position as opposed to just full lights. Because how about the people in back? Why don't they have daytime running lights and have the rear running lights come on so you can see a little better? To me, if the point was to have the vehicle more visible to other drivers, have them all the lights come on.
well, all you need is a simple relay that runs off whenever the engine's running. It turns on the running lights. It's running. You need running lights. Tail lights, front marker lights, and that's enough to improve the visibility.
Right. If that's the point, then have them all and have visibility all around.
That's how I would do it if I was writing the rules.
That would be the way to do it.
Much safer.
But they didn't ask me, so that's not how it's done.
Nor do I think they will.
Probably not.
Also, the Freelander LR2 is being updated, and it looks like for 2015, and is currently running around the Nuremberg Ring, or at least it was seen running around the Nuremberg Ring as a test mule, getting checked out. So
In the process of being ruined, according to James May.
any vehicle that goes around
Any
Nuremberg
vehicle,
Ring is
once they've built a vehicle and design it at Nürburgring, it's ruined. And he might have something to that, but in terms of ride comfort is where he's coming from. It becomes less drivable. It becomes more sporty, but less drivable, is his point. But anyway, it's funny when he says it.
You're right. You're right. But don't forget, Land Rover has its own test track that is off-road. So that's hopefully those two will match themselves up and balance things.
They just need to have a few shortcuts at the Nürburgring, then they could do both things.
And Rover has announced the 2014 U.S. model lineup. The thing for me, the biggest news out of this, there's like 3 or 4 things, but the LR name is still around. They didn't convert over to Freelander like they were supposed to, and Disco like they were supposed to. So we still have the LR2 and the LR4. The Disco 4, however, it gets a V6, and it loses its standard 2-speed transfer case. The Evoque gets
So they're making a Freelander out of it.
And the Evoque gets a 9-speed transmission, which is like stunning to me.
Well, the thing is that you got to look at automatic transmission technology, and there have been more gears progressively building up in the cases. So if you don't have as many gears as possible, you're no longer upscale.
Well, doesn't it also help with gas mileage?
It can. It helps with drivability and gas mileage because you have, many more closely matched ratios to your speed and load and that sort of thing. But it's really as much that as a perception of affluence because, a 6-speed probably is enough if you've got enough engine. But considering you can buy cheap cars with 6-speed auto, it's not enough. It's not good enough.
And follow on to a previous story, Bentley is officially coming out with its SUV, which is to compete with the Range Rover in 2016. They're going to call it the Falcon. At least it's expected to be called the Falcon. And however, it will probably be twice as much as a high-end Range Rover, which I think the high-end Range Rover in the United States is $135,000 for the autobiography edition.
So the Bentley will be right in line with all the other Bentley products price-wise.
Correct.
Well, as long as they don't call it the Special Falcon, we'll be okay. Special Falcon was the project name for the Ford Mustang. Aren't we glad it wasn't called it for that car either?
What am I missing?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Ford Falcon?
The Mustang was based on the Ford Falcon. So when they decided to come out with a sporty car, the best name they could come up with was Special Falcon.
Oh, that was like
which is a stupid name. It wasn't until late in the game they decided to call it the Mustang.
I think we briefly mentioned this last time, but they're working on a Range Rover Hybrid. It's an electric gas hybrid. And
diesel hybrid.
Oh, diesel. Yes. Sorry. Electric diesel, the good kind.
The only right way to do it.
Exactly.
It's a 3-liter V6 diesel, 8-speed automatic gearbox, 47 brake horsepower electric motor.
Yeah, it looks very nice. Unfortunately, it looks like it's not coming to the U.S. That would have been nice to have not only diesel, but electric diesel hybrid.
So we need to start a petition on change.org.
That's right.
Yeah.
Customer demand changes the company. I mean, considering how they've changed their mind about the new Defender, it's been on again, off again, on again. They could change their minds and decide to bring the Range Rover.
What would be the reason for not bringing it? I don't really understand that whole part of it.
What you mean? Why it's not coming to the U.S.?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously not a safety or emissions thing, so it's just we don't feel like putting the wheel on that side.
Diesels still aren't considered all that popular over here. You want a diesel, it's going to be a big, heavy truck, and so the concept of a diesel hybrid, perhaps they feel the American public isn't ready for it yet.
I will pay for diesel for 44 miles per gallon over premium gas any day of the week.
I I think you're in a catch-22 situation. I keep hearing this, that the U.S. public isn't ready for diesel, so therefore they're not going to bring them in. But then on the other side, they're not bringing them in, so how can people then go ahead and buy them? So
Yeah,
I'm not buying this notion that it's because people don't like diesels or they're not going to buy diesel. Yes, diesel has, I think, a bad history in the U.S. That is changing. Volkswagen's had diesel for years. BMW, I've seen ads already for BMWs bringing diesels in. Series 3, Series 5, I think the Series 6 even are going to have diesels coming to the U.S. So.
Oh, it's definitely coming. I just don't think it's maybe to the level that Land Rover feels comfortable bringing it over. Because keep in mind, it's also a Range Rover, so you've got to have a number of people with enough money to buy a Range Rover, and the premium price on top of that for the hybrid drivetrain, and that wants diesel.
Well, if it's strictly a money issue, I don't think that's something to use as a reason not to do it, because people are already spending way too much on a vehicle, as far as I'm concerned. And then you have to spend a couple another $1,000 on the hybrid, and then potentially even more on fuel. Well, actually, no, the fuel costs are about the same for premium fuel and diesel.
Well, I mean, I'm there. That's no problem. I get it. But I think a lot of the people who are in their target demographic probably don't get it and don't understand diesel.
That may be the fact. The true thing is they just don't understand it.
Yeah, but it says hybrid. They understand that.
Well, right, yes, but when you think, as is evidenced by Morgan when he started the story, he even made the slip himself. He said gasoline, electric hybrid, and I think that's people immediately think gas and electric. They don't think diesel and electric.
Right, and I think it's one of those things that while we're getting more options. It's just one of those things where people are not going to drive up to a gas station or even necessarily find a gas station that pumps diesel easily.
Well, you do have to keep your eyes open. I mean, it's available. It's out there, but you can't just think about, I'll just pull over at the next gas station because the next gas station might not have it. You do have to know where they are.
Yeah, I think around us, we have a lot of diesel drivers, and I think that it's only about 3/4 of gas stations that actually carry diesel. And most of those are.
I would agree with you on that, Morgan, especially around my part of Pennsylvania. It's about the same. But I've noticed, especially in the last year, of course, it helps if you own a diesel vehicle because then you seem to pay attention to it more or need to. But there's plenty of diesel out there. There's places that have diesel I didn't even expect it would have it.
And then there's places you think do that don't when you get there. So I mean, it's tricky. I mean, it's much better than it used to be, mind you. And because I've driven diesel for a number of years, and I've seen more availability. But I mean, you do have to think ahead sometimes because it's not every corner station is going to have it. It's
not every corner station. You're correct, but usually, it's way more, I think, than the popular perception is. It's hard to find diesel. I don't think that's the case, especially hasn't been for me.
Well,
almost every Sheetz now has diesel. Almost every Sheetz.
Okay. Well, it's not impossible. Definitely not impossible to find it. It's not really hard to find it, but it's a little harder than the gasoline people tend to think. It's a new adjustment for people to make is that they have to look for the special fuel.
Right. Although the nice thing about the diesel that's different than the gas, you don't necessarily even need as many stations having diesel because you're typically going further.
Well, yeah, you can afford to roll past a station.
Absolutely.
Or four.
But so I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're farther apart, but you got to know about that. You got to think about that.
Harold told me this when I bought my new Jetta. Harold told me this would happen, and I see it time and time again. It's fun. You put fuel in the Jetta, it says you're going to get 300 miles range, and then as you drive, especially on the highway, you increase. The more you consume diesel, your range goes up.
Yeah, you're making fuel.
It's wonderful. That is one of my favorite things.
Well, it has to do with the average being much higher on the highway, but it's just fun. You get out on the highway, and your range goes from 300 to 350 to 380 to 400.
To
it's
500.
Like, if I keep this up, I can go forever.
Exactly. I'll never run out of diesel. So the interesting thing about the Rover, the Rangy diesel, I thought, was that they had taken it, they were actually using it in the field. They followed the Silk Road, or retracing some of the Silk Road. They went through 12 countries, I think almost 10,000 miles from India to the Solihull factory. And so that's impressive. I think that's a good showing.
That's a great way to test it.
similar to when they this year when they drove across America. A story we'll get to when we come back.
Harold's M Word.
It was the age of enlightenment. It was also the age of war. For centuries, most of Europe had been involved in seemingly endless battles and political bickering. This came to a head in the mid-18th century with what was known as the 7 Years' War. By 1756, nearly all the world's powers were involved, and battles were fought on every continent. It was truly a world war. On the European continent, the war centered on the hostility between Austria and Prussia, with alliances that involved all of Europe. In the rest of the world, England, France, and Spain were fighting for ownership of their colonies. When the smoke finally cleared in 1763, it was clear that one of the biggest winners was Great Britain, which cemented its status as the world's #1 colonial superpower. It was also clear that one of the biggest losers was France, which not only lost vast amounts of colonial territory, but also took quite a beating in the European theater. France's foreign minister, Etienne Francois, Duc de Choiseul, was very upset by France's defeat and alarmed by the magnitude of England's victory. He felt that to avenge their losses, France and Spain needed to align themselves and invade England. In order to do this, he would first need to rebuild and upgrade the French military. As part of this effort, he turned to Lieutenant General Jean-Baptiste Vaquet de Gribeauval, commander of the French artillery. During the war, Gribeauval served in Austria and had learned much about the superiority of the Austrian artillery and of the shortcomings of the French systems. With the backing of the Duc de Choiseul, Gribeauval embarked on a complete overhaul of the French artillery systems. Not only was he an experienced military leader, but he was also an accomplished engineer. He created an entirely new method of making cannon barrels with a high degree of precision, which allowed them to be made smaller and lighter without sacrificing range or accuracy. Gribeauval was the first person to apply the concept of interchangeable parts to gun making. This meant that parts from any arsenal could be used to build or repair guns from any other part of the country. This also meant that the army could be run more efficiently, with fewer arsenals and smaller stores of parts. To move the new guns, Gribeauval redesigned the carriages, making them lighter and more maneuverable. He also studied the way horses were used to pull the guns and the supply wagons. By hitching the horses two abreast instead of the traditional single file, fewer horses were needed to carry the same weight. The vehicle was easier to control, and it was more maneuverable. While this change was revolutionary, Gribeauval wasn't satisfied. He wanted to change the world. He wanted a machine to do the job of the horses. To accomplish this unthinkable feat, Gribeauval enlisted another military engineer that had served in Austria, Nicolas Joseph Cugnot. After the war, Cugnot had been teaching at the Paris Arsenal. Under the direction of Gribeauval and the Duc de Choiseul, he designed and supervised the construction of a small prototype for a steam-drawn artillery wagon. On October 23, 1769, Nicolas Cugnot made history when the world's first self-propelled vehicle was successfully operated on the grounds of the Paris Arsenal. After this huge accomplishment, Gribeauval asked Cugnot to build a second prototype. This one was to be larger, capable of hauling 4 passengers and up to 5 tons of payload at a speed of 3 miles per hour so it could follow the marching troops. It was also expected to have better range, as the first prototype would only run for 10 to 15 minutes before stopping to add water and rebuild the fire. In late 1770, the second prototype was ready for testing. Range was greatly improved, as testing showed it could be driven for over an hour on one firing. It is believed that speed was not yet up to the military requirement, and that it was unstable to the point of being hard to control. During one test, it was rumored to have crashed into a brick wall at the arsenal. If true, this would be the world's first motor vehicle accident. Around the time of the second prototype testing, the Duc de Choiseul fell out of political favor with the French government and was fired. The new foreign minister wasn't interested in steam carriages, so the project was canceled. Fortunately, Cugnot's second prototype was preserved and can be seen today in Paris at the National Museum of Arts and Industry. It would be quite some time before armies became truly mechanized, but it's very clear that military ambition has had a direct effect on the invention of the automobile. The world's first automobile was meant to be a gun tractor. 2 centuries later, one of the Land Rover models most coveted by enthusiasts, the 101 FC, was also designed to be a gun tractor. Say what you will about wars, but they do make for the coolest toys. And welcome back.
So Land Rover also did a test of the Disco 4, the LR4, across America this time to show off its capabilities, and they went 4,300 miles in 27 days, not using a paved road. Well, technically they said off-road, across the United States. And they went from North Carolina, Asheville, and went all the way towards Seattle in Washington. Apparently, according to the information that they have, their other video on their website, there was no not paved roads that they could get from the East Coast to I guess, North Carolina. So they started in North Carolina. And they claim they are the first four-wheel vehicle to travel across the country without going on roads. Apparently they had followed some trails that motorcycles had blazed. So.
Yeah, it's the Transamerica Trail. I've looked at it before. There are some people who tackle sections of it in four-wheel vehicles, but generally it's a motorcycle trail.
There's a couple points that look like, I think in Colorado, it looked really hairy. I mean, like the K turns where you come in and go back out again, and they said there were these steep angles, and the guy in the video, Jeremy Hart, I think his name is, he said, and you're driving, and if you do the wrong thing, you'll be flying.
Nice.
You could tumble down, and it looked pretty hairy. They didn't show any like super hairy stuff, but you could just tell from where they were.
It's a truck. No, it's an airplane. No, it's a truck.
Colorado in general is like that. So I mean, just their roads are like that. I can't imagine off-roading the way they do it. I mean, there's no guardrails. You miss the road, and they like to say out there, you have time to call and update your life insurance before you hit.
Some of the hills they showed, you were tumbling down quite a ways.
I remember some of those roads.
Yep. There were some. I'll put up links to the two articles, and there's some pictures in the video. So I highly recommend you go to CentreSteer.com, and then you can look at this podcast, and there'll be links there to these stories and other stories that we talk about. And I encourage everybody to take a look at the video and the pictures. It was quite interesting. Morgan, you've looked into, is there a website for the trail or details? Because actually that'd be something you might, I see there is one.
Yeah, it's transamtrail.com.
I see that now. I didn't
you can buy a map for it, and they've got, GPS coordinates and everything, because it's a lot of different off-road trails.
That's slick. I think we've talked about my big trip in 2017. I think I might want to do parts of that off-road.
Can you get their map as like a GPS plugin?
I know that you can get it as a map, a roll chart, or GPS, so I'm not sure exactly which formats the GPS is in.
Okay.
I think it's Garmin. I'm pretty sure that's what I saw when I was looking at it before.
Yeah, it says you have to have MapSource or Basecamp, which are Garmin tools. In fact, I already have Basecamp on my Mac, so that'd be interesting.
So that would plug directly into your GPS for you.
Plug directly in. Very
cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I may need to incorporate this into my trip idea now. Although generally traveling alone on some of these trails I wouldn't want to do, but
you could have ride-alongs for certain portions of it.
It could be, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, even their full map is 91 maps put together. You can pay like $372
Wow.
for the whole set, but obviously you can just pick and choose the ones that you want.
Well, yeah, unless you're actually committed to doing the full length of the trail, you kind of don't need all the maps.
And it seems like probably a fair price considering what they most likely had to go through to create that. Just to get all the GPS tags exactly for the trail. And I'd read about it. Apparently it's, dead on.
You mean the
It's
GPS?
pretty cool.
Files or data?
Yes.
Right, it's probably worth that money to have that level of information, I would think.
You can purchase individual GPS files per state. So Tennessee is $24, Mississippi's $24. It looks like they're all $24. Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Mississippi. That looks really, really interesting.
And you can get the maps as well. They're about $42 a pop, so per state.
That's slick, very slick. So, well, thanks to Land Rover for revealing that.
And for proving it can be done.
Proving it can be done. So that is the news for this month. And next, which is kind of nice, the rolls into events that have taken place and will take place, very much similar to what Land Rover just did with the Transamerica Trail. What events do we have coming up? First up is, at least in the United States, which we are living in, so I guess we focus on that. MAR 2013 takes place October 3rd through the 6th, which should be next weekend, right? At Wheatland Farms in Virginia, in Pembroke, Virginia. This used to be the premier event in North America for rovering. Used to get 300 trucks or so. It seems like the event's kind of
Dwindled?
Thank you. I was looking for a nice diplomatic word. Has dwindled and is being somewhat replaced by Conclave, although I'm not completely sure that it will do that. But anyways, that's coming up. Is anybody going or know anybody going? I do not.
I do not.
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
You can register if you still want to go, or if I get this...
I suspect you could pay at the gate, too. That's always been the case in the past.
Right, I think you still can. It's $90 for registration. You do get, there's group camping, all levels of trails, raffles, giveaways, T-shirts. Pets are allowed.
Yeah, it's always been a dog-friendly venue.
Then coming up in November is Rovers on the Rocks 5. That's going to take place, as I said, November 15th, looks like until November 16th. That will take place in Tremont, Pennsylvania. Is that where... what's the name of the off-road park, right?
Roush Creek.
Is that Roush Creek?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Anybody been to Rovers on the Rocks? I know one of the guys in our club has been there, but I've not been myself.
I know it by reputation only.
Yeah, a couple of guys have gone. I've not been yet.
And then there's also going to be an event that's, it sounds like it's more of an off-road technical course called Robosonia. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
And I don't have the dates in front of me. Does anybody else have that?
I want to say it was mid-October.
I think it's actually mid to late October. You're right. I should have looked this up ahead of time. I apologize for not doing that, but that's coming up. And that's also in Pennsylvania. And that's, I think, near Roush Creek or in that vicinity. And that's, from everything I hear about that event, it's a technical course, and you get to do a bunch of these technical challenges and see how your truck does, and you get scored points, and I guess there are winners. And
I know they've been doing it for a number of years, but I don't know much about it.
It may also be a rally too. I think there's a little bit. Of
there's quite a gathering involved with it too.
Yeah, so
sounds cool.
It's put on by one of the larger Land Rover clubs at the other end of the state.
That's
Rovers. It's an acronym for something.
Yeah,
I forget how the letters all shake out, but all the letters of that spell something.
Right.
Yeah, so it looks like Robosonia is October 24th to 27th this year. And that's being put on by, as you said, Rovers, which is roversclub.org.
So one event that we just came from last weekend was Conclave, and that takes place in Gore, Virginia, or right outside of Gore, Virginia, at the Cove. The Cove is the name of the campground. They have a lot of space there, some really good trails, lots of room. I went, Mark went. Very heavy Disco 2 oriented, I think, because the event itself started by a bunch of disco owners, and so it's still lots of discos. There were some Defenders there. There were a couple Rangies, the odd series truck. But basically, I mean, you want to see discos, tons of discos. But the weekend was nice. Bend is nice. Good camping. They actually have showers, which is kind of nice. I thought was a little bonus.
Built-in running water. Imagine that.
Yes. And the campground, they said, was nice. They have a number of different trails. They have blue, yellow, green, blue, red, and black, if I remember correctly. While the map is okay, it's not perfect, and it's really not to scale. So if you're, looking at these trails, it's helpful to go with someone who has kind of been on them before, kind of knows where they begin and where they end. You can get yourself into some really hairy areas in business if you're not familiar with that trail system, which is typical with almost any trail system. But the newbie who thinks, oh, there's a green trail and it continues on for the length of the campground and I can do all that. That may not be the case.
I'm assuming the colors refer to the level of difficulty.
That's correct. And they have a nice system where they'll tell you, green is stock trucks and blue is you may get a little bit of damage or pinstriping, those kinds of things.
Or you need lift or something.
Lift. Yeah.
Or, winch required for the black trails and things like that.
Right. I did take my stock Disco 2 with street tires and went on the blue trails, didn't have a problem. Didn't bottom out, none of that. So it did nicely on the blue trails. And
you're also not a novice, which helps.
Right, but there wasn't anything really challenging on the green trails. I would get clear. I went on the green trails.
The green trails are the bunny trails.
Yeah,
yeah.
And you take a car on most of those, not all of them, but most of them are just a standard car because you get on site and then you go to a campground and then there are trails around that campground and then there are 5 or 6, maybe 8 campgrounds, and they all have different trails around those. So to get to most of the campgrounds, or if not all of them, I didn't go to all of them, but I think you're going to be able to get a car there, and then you can go explore on different trails, and they all get different levels of challenge from there, such as the blue trails go up a level, and I think Mark has something to add on the blue trails.
Yeah, the blue trails were they were interesting. They really do need to work on their trail marking, though. As John was saying, you could be on a green trail, and there would be a little loop off of it that might be very close to another green trail, but this one might be black. And there's no trail markings while you're out there. So it was interesting to follow those things.
So the trails can change color with no notice if you're not careful.
Well, even if you are being careful, the map doesn't exactly line up to the trails you're on. There's additional trails that may or may not be on the map, but it was a little confusing.
I had a lot of problem with the scale of the map.
So they need to sell the package that the Transamerica Trail people are selling.
Yes.
Something like that would have been good, because you really could very quickly get yourself in pretty big trouble. I managed to get myself in some trouble. It was mostly intentionally. And,
well, you were trying to test out your truck. The problem is you try to test out your truck the 30 seconds after you got onto the trail. So do you want me to tell the story, or do you want to tell the story?
Did you say watch this before it happened?
I told him to go faster.
Oh, well, there you go.
I don't think faster would have helped. I drove into pudding.
You did, actually. It did look like pudding. If you want to see some pictures, go up to fplrg.com, look under 2000 events 2013, and you will see Conclave, and then you can see pictures of Mark stuck in a mud hole. And so I parked my truck because I knew we were at the end of the green. We're now going to go into the blue, and I'm going to take video and pictures. Hopped in Mark's truck.
And it's your last running Rover at the moment. So
my last good running Rover, yes. And so we pull into this tree area, and there's like 3 mud holes and one little area to snake through that's not a mud hole. And so Mark goes, "Oh, I'll take the one in the middle. That doesn't look too bad." So Mark, hold on, Mark, let me get out. I want to take pictures. So I get out. Mark loops around, and I have a stick. Conveniently, someone had a stick there, and I poke it in, and it's not too deep. Mud was very still and calm, so it wasn't moving water. And you stick in the stick, and it didn't go down far. And then I checked another part, and it went down a little further, maybe like in 2 or 3 inches. It went down maybe 6 or 8, maybe 9 inches in. And I get on the radio, and I say, "Mark, you might want to check this out before you get in." Mark didn't respond back. And Mark goes into the Mark goes into the mud hole. Feel free to correct me, Mark, if I'm wrong on any of this. Goes into the mud hole, and he's doing fine. But he starts pushing a mud bow wake. It was what it is. And the more he went, the more he pushed his bow wake, and it churned up all the mud, and it started going everywhere, getting onto the side of the truck and the front of the truck, and it comes up to the bumper. And then he would go backwards a little bit and go forward and push and back and forth, and he's pushing. He's making some progress. And he was actually starting to, and we find out later that he went in at, say, with a 2-inch level, 2-3-inch level of mud, and then it dropped off into a little pit, a deeper pit that was probably down maybe a foot. And then there's a ledge there that pops back up to 2 inches again before you get to the end, where you would go up maybe, I'd say another foot to get out of the pit. So he's hitting that ledge, and he's pushing, trying to get up on that ledge. But as he's pushing to get up over that ledge, the mud comes back up into the engine bay. From what best we can figure, forces its way in through the air box, gets into the air cleaner, gets into the air intake system, and completely destroys the MAF, the mass airflow sensor. And he's dead stop in the mud hole. It won't turn over.
Yeah, they don't like to run with the MAF full of mud.
No.
Yeah. So I brought my disco over because there was an area you could do that, and I tried to pull them a little bit, but my street tires were spinning and it was not good. So I went and got help. We got a diesel 110 in there. He started pulling the hook up the shackle, and he pulled Mark a little bit. Mark's still dead, even though we tried to start it a couple times. It's not cleared itself. And then the Defender turns around, and he's now backwards and pulling instead of pulling from the rear instead of pulling from the front. And the shackle on that's welded to the frame of the 110 snaps, flies back and hits Mark's truck, thankfully, in the license plate.
Did you buy a lottery ticket after that, Mark?
I should have, because it dented up the door pretty good. Crushed the license plate holder, dented up the license plate. A couple inches higher to have been through the window.
Yeah, it's it goes through the. I've seen some video of some of that stuff, broken straps, and it goes through the window and all the way up into the back of the driver's seat before it's done.
Thankfully, at that angle, it would not have gone into his. There's no one else in the truck at the time either. It would have probably hit the back of the passenger's side rear seat, or possibly even could have gone out the side window. But it thankfully was at the right angle. It went down instead of going up or straight level, so it kind of went down and hit the corner of the license plate. I hope you're leaving that dent in the door as a mark of your off-roadness.
It matches the dent on the other side of the door. So
there you go.
So then
it's now symmetrical.
So the Defender went for more help and got a P38, a Range Rover P38 with these mud tires on it. He comes out, hooks up Mark, and just starts pulling for all get out. Thankfully, the strap Mark had was one of those stretchy, they have a name, I can't think of it.
Snatch strap.
And he's stretching that puppy out for all it's worth, and finally, Mark's still trying to get started, and it won't. Finally, gets Mark pulled out of there and up onto onto dry land and start drying things out. And now we're able to get into the engine bay and see what really happened and figure out the MAF is bad, and it was all caked with mud. This is aside from all the other fun that went on, the thing that surprised me most was how many people had extra MAFs on site. There had to be 6 offers of new MAFs. So they're like, oh, I got one. So thankfully, Mark switched out, got one of those. Somebody gave him one. He switched it out, and the truck ran fine. The rest of the event after that.
It's an easy thing to carry as a spare.
Sadly, the guy who gave me his then went and destroyed his that night and needed one.
Yeah,
which he came up with.
Not a mud hole, but more of a water hole, and went too fast. Water got splashed up and got into the air intake system, and with probably a little bit of mud too. But basically, it was the water knocked out the MAF. He gets a replacement that night. Gets the truck running again. It's fine. Next day, he goes to leave the event. This is Sunday morning, and the MAF dies. That MAF dies. He has to get another MAF to finally get off site. It was a MAF weekend.
Well, they're a delicate piece of the system, and they're very sensitive to really anything being in them. They want to be perfectly clean and perfectly dry, otherwise they don't work right. So it's a good thing to carry as a spare.
We're going to be building a new air box So hopefully
right.
that'll never happen again.
Still worth carrying a spare MAF.
So I agree, but the fact that the mud actually busted and made my clip disappear off the airbox kind of annoyed me.
Well, and given that you've gone to the trouble of trying to put in a snorkel to get your intake up out of the water as much as possible, and then to have a weak link in the middle that's fragile is kind of disheartening.
Yeah, the airbox was dry, except for the top of it where mud had come on top of the filter.
All right, well,
Yeah.
we'll have to look at fabricating something more bulletproof.
So aside from that excitement, Mark did do a little further trail riding, and I think enjoyed himself, and camping was nice. Anything else you want to throw out there, Mark? I hope you didn't mind me telling the story.
No, not at all. No, it was a good time. That was really the only downside. Probably cut out being able to do 2 or 3 more trails than we ended up doing.
Yeah.
Was this your first big outing, Mark, or have you been on others?
We were at the Wilds.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Did that.
The best part, we haven't talked about, the best part about this event, it was 3 hours from my house, whereas Mars typically 6 hours from my house. So that was a nice added bonus. It's relatively close.
The Wilds is pretty close, too, provided you can make the whole trip and you don't have to wait for the tow truck to take you home.
Thank you. Thank you. So anything else on this event? As I said, do you want to see photos? I can put a link up to on the CentreSteer site to FPLRG, which is our very own local Land Rover Club, Fort Pitt Land Rover Group, and with pictures, and you can see Mark stuck in the drink, or in this case, the
Stuck in the pudding, yes.
the pudding. Yeah,
Planted in pudding.
It was pretty thick.
And while he's stuck in there, we're waiting 15, 20 minutes for help to arrive. Like, oh, Mark, you should get in there and take a look and open up the hood and take a look inside and see what's going on. So he does. He pops the hood, and then there's just no way. There's nothing he could attach. His bumper was gone, and anything that was remaining was so thin he couldn't get his feet on, and it was also very close to the mud and very slick too. So he did try to get in there and take a look at it and get it cleaned out while he was still in the mud. But I was hoping he would climb onto the front. I encouraged him to do that because I knew he'd fall in.
Yeah, that wasn't happening.
Then
I
you
didn't
have to have a truck to pull him out because he'd be stuck.
I didn't see the benefit to me being up to my hips in mud, because no matter what I did, we weren't going to make the truck run again. I was pretty sure. And even if it did, the chances of it getting out were shrinking.
That's just another advantage of having a series truck. You got wings you can climb on.
Right.
There's always a place to stand when you have a series truck.
Good point. All right, our last topic is not strictly Rover related, and it's something that I've been thinking about and I keep track on, and give me a moment to kind of pull things together, what I'm talking about. There was an article in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette paper I look at frequently, said that Pennsylvania drivers are logging fewer miles in vehicles and are opting for alternative forms of transit. So putting that together with an article that I had seen earlier, and fortunately I didn't save a link to that, but younger folks are not getting into cars as much as they used to. So they don't see, in my estimation, cars as their means of becoming independent and going out and seeing their friends and getting away from their parents. So putting this together and then throwing a third thing in, which is the automated cars that are quickly becoming a thing and actually close to being almost, I'd say, in production. Maybe that's the best way to put that. So you're having autonomous cars that can go places and do things and pick you up and drop you off. And if they aren't actually happening now, they certainly seem to be. They will happen very soon. They'll be able to do that. So
they're more likely to happen now than they ever have been in the past when they've been promising them. They've been talking about this for 60 years now. But
all the pieces are in place.
Yeah, the pieces are in place now, and it's much more likely that it could happen in our lifetime. I think we're still a ways away from that, but I think
I absolutely disagree with you.
I think the horizon's within sight now, at least.
Well, and I haven't gotten to my big point yet, but just to hit on what you're talking about, Harold, you already have cars that have adaptive cruise control, which is part of the being able to sense what's ahead.
Right.
They even in Land Rover is coming out with adaptive cruise control. They have the look ahead feature where they're looking several cars down. I'm not sure how they do that, but we don't need to talk about that right now. And they're able to sense what's happening. There's cars that can brake, even though you're in full control of the vehicle. They will brake for you in an emergency situation. So that's why I'm saying we're way more closer than we've ever been. These things are going to happen in a short amount of time. I'm saying years instead of, say, lifetimes or decades. Things are going to happen very soon. But putting all this, so the point I was bringing all these three things up is the driving experience is going away. At least that's how I see it. I see that with less younger folks taking to driving and finding cars interesting and fun, with the automated cars coming and you having less control of your vehicle, and then seeing how people, partly because of the economy, Pennsylvania drivers are driving less, but it's not the full story. The more of the story, they see that there's been this drop off, but it's not picking back up like it used to in the past when you've had economic downturns. Less people drove, and then as things got better, they start getting back into their cars and driving again. That's not happening. So my point of this whole story is that the driving experience is going away, that the importance of cars and hence my interest and excitement and enjoyment of driving, I feel is affected and is in peril. That I won't, when, I don't know when, because this one I may be, for you, Harold, I'm not sure about. I may agree with you on it may be a while. When will I not be able to drive? Will I not be allowed to drive because, that car is not independent and it is not you as the driver can't drive it. You have to allow.
I think you'll get to a point where you won't be allowed to drive this particular type of vehicle, or you won't be allowed to drive on this road unless you have an automated car. But I don't think that you in your lifetime will see a scenario where you won't be able to drive at all. I think there will still be some roads where cars are allowed, and as long as you're not insistent on having the newest car out there, you can always have an old car that's still capable of being driven by a human. It becomes a hobby more than the transportation at that point. But that's fine because you're already in that place.
I certainly agree with it. I hope so. I agree with you.
I mean, you already have hobby vehicles, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking.
Well, that's true.
I mean, if all you had was vehicles that you never had to worry about and you'd always turn the key and drive on, you wouldn't be into this podcast.
With the automation, what I've never heard about, and I don't hear about, is how these automated vehicles do in inclement weather or do in bad weather. And so another part of this is, yes, you might not be able to drive and down the road because the car is automated and taking care of itself, but maybe if it gets into bad weather, it might turn the vehicle back over to you, because I don't know how good they're going to be, and I've not seen how good they are in snow, rain, driving rain, fog. I suspect they could be good, but I'm not sure.
I'd be concerned about that, too. It hit a slippery spot. How is the vehicle going to know that it's in a slippery spot? I guess there's probably ways to do that. I'm just thinking the human is still a much better processor of that than the machine is.
Well, I think it's speed, though. But I think slipperiness, is actually better on the computer car side, because it can respond faster, better, and know it's happening more than a human will.
It can respond. I just question its ability to predict as well as the human.
Ah, okay.
And responding, if a human sees a situation where things aren't as good, the human can prepare for that. If the machine doesn't know it's bad until after something's already happened and it's lost traction, it's much harder to get back what you've lost than it is to prevent losing it in the first place.
And now that we have less people enjoying driving, and we have automated systems taking over normal functions, you have less people who will know how to pay attention to driving and anticipate these issues and problems. I see issues every day where people don't anticipate normal driving issues. Normal driving, they don't anticipate what's happening on the road. I can't imagine we're going to get better at the problem times.
Well, unfortunately, people have become lulled by the systems they already have in place, and they have this false sense of security because they have these automated systems, they're anti-lock brakes, so now they don't have to plan ahead, they don't have to think about anything because they expect the car to take care of it for them. And I think this problem is going to get worse when the cars become even more autonomous. The people just don't feel the need to learn anything.
Well, and they're getting far more complex as well. I mean, even basic cars now come with almost all standard with ABS and traction control.
Well, they have to have those.
They have to have those.
Right, exactly. But they're still far more complicated. I mean, even, cruise control, most manufacturers don't suggest using it in the rain. Yet, if you buy a new car, not many people will sit down and read the entire manual and memorize which things they should use when, and then remember those when it's necessary.
Well, the manuals are more complicated too. I mean, they've gone from 39 pages to 639 pages.
Right.
There's just a whole lot more to know.
There's a lot more. And, we see the same thing up here in Vermont. We get a lot of snow every winter, or used to, and people spend the first half of the winter just freaking out, not knowing what to do.
The same thing happens in the rain.
Exactly.
Where the sun rises.
Yeah, what's that big yellow ball in the sky? I've never seen that before.
I have a contention especially in my area, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. I have this contention. It's a little off the topic, but when weather gets bad, people always complain about Pennsylvania drivers, Pittsburgh drivers. They can't drive in the rain. They can't drive in the snow. My contention is it's worse when it's sunny, because then people have this sense that it's tougher to see because there's a lot of glare and a lot of things going on. People not wearing sunglasses, which I don't understand why you're not ever wearing sunglasses, is beyond me, except if it's nighttime. But so when that glowing ball of giant gas is orange is in the sky, I think that gives people more of a sense of not having to worry about what's going on, because theoretically they can see more, see faster, see farther, and they're less focused on the driving experience.
Well, I think people just need to stop qualifying that sentence about they don't know how to drive when it's this. It's just people just don't know how to drive. It's that simple. Just people just don't know how to drive.
I totally agree. And something else kind of in the same line as all of this is, with all of the cars becoming more and more complicated and technologically advanced, the average person or people are becoming less and less capable to work on their cars and tinker on their cars. And I think that's a gap that's growing. It's not like everybody knows somebody who can do something for their car. It's turning into a very specialized skill set. Well, so there's not that relationship with a vehicle anymore like there used to be either.
Well, they are more difficult to work on, and not only is it hard for people to work on their own stuff, there's actually a growing shortage of qualified technicians as well, and that's a problem I see in my industry all the time.
I'm going to take the slightly opposite from that, Mark. While yes, they are more complex, I'll give you that, and they are more challenging in many ways. I think it's just that the nature of the vehicle itself has changed. It's gone from being mechanical to electronic. So very much like a computer. And so they're becoming computers. Mobile computers is really essentially what they're becoming. And those who are technical and in the know about a computer, I think, naturally lend themselves now to cars. I think that's why I see a lot of IT people enjoying cars, because those two are merging and mating together. So those who enjoy computers, and what I mean that is those who like tinkering with the hardware and the software, maybe installing Linux as an example. Our own Morgan, for example, is in that space.
Who is interested in a vehicle with absolutely no computers in it?
I
get
that.
Really into IT as a hobby, like the ones that don't have the computers.
I get that, but it still goes together.
We're on that. Car computers and computers, to me, are drastically different.
Well, they are.
I've been tinkering with computers, coming up on like 20 years now, and I've been tinkering with cars for around the same time period, and the two never really merged for me.
I understand why you say that. The revolution in how the mechanical device that is the car has changed to an electronic device, happened, I think, kind of subtly, and it was not immediately evident. And I think that, whereas the computer, it's the same thing. It's still an electronic device, But you even look at 20 years ago what a computer was to what it is now. They are vastly different in different things. They've changed over time, and the way you deal with it and operate on it and work on it are vastly different. I think the mindset and the thinking, the technical aspect of it, the tinkering part, if you will, applies. So you tinkered with a computer, whether you had a Commodore 64, whether you had an Amiga or an early Apple, you might still tinker now. And I think that same thing kind of happens with cars. And yes, you may not. The old cars are not fully electronic, and they are not like the modern cars are. But I think that's the plus, is because it's easier to understand and it's easier to get your handle on, because especially with Land Rovers being the operative one here, they're simple and you get what's going on, and then as maybe you get into it, you might apply that to more modern things. I don't know. Maybe my case isn't completely made, but
I would.
My thinking that they're very much related.
Here's where I see it. The car and trucks, I'm just going to call them all cars now for simplicity, they are still a mechanical device. It still takes a mechanical skill set that has been around for ever since there have been cars. And there's still those guys that are into that part of it. But on top of that now, you have this level of control, which is done by computers. And you'll have people that understand the computers and get that part of it, especially some of the younger folks that are into modifying. In fact, that part of it is now not called modifying, it's called hacking. You hack your vehicle. But then there's the mechanical side of it that they don't understand, and they don't have access to learn those sorts of things. So you have this group of people that know the mechanical stuff but don't understand any of this newfangled computer stuff. And then you have people that are into the computer stuff but don't have the skill set to make sure the mechanical structure underneath it is any good. So you got these highly modified computers that are like mounted in dangerous vehicles, and you got these vehicles that are real solid with bad electronics, and in between there needs to be some meeting of the minds.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult problem anyway to try to merge, to link the mechanical with the electronic anyway.
And it's the worst possible environment for the electronics to be operating in, too, which is an additional challenge.
Very much, yeah. But I think that it's the sort of analytical troubleshooting abilities of the technical minded that draws both crowds into the same medium.
Thank you for saying that better than I did.
And here's where I would point out that we need to stress more education in the technical arena to address these issues, because that sort of thing is being phased out by our school systems all over the country. And it's a shame, because we are going to see this qualified technician shortage I spoke of, because there is not enough of it being taught, and not everyone has access to enough money to go to the trade school and learn it. It used to be you could take shop in high school and you could learn enough that you could actually go out and you could get a job.
Yeah, there's very little of that anymore. It's very sad.
Pennsylvania has a change. It has changed. They have something called STEM, which is I don't know if it's other states, but I definitely know PA is doing it. Where they're trying to increase science, technology. I forget what the M stands for, or excuse me, the E is, and then there's M for mechanicals. They're trying to get some of that stuff back in, and even my own school district here isn't putting in a STEM program.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's very little emphasis on the vocational side of that.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
I think a lot of that's been lost, and it's unfortunate because there just aren't as many avenues to get it unless you pay for it in the private sector.
And, those jobs aren't seen as highly sought after, valued jobs.
They aren't seen that way. Unfortunately, we still need them in our society.
Absolutely, still need people to work on stuff.
And I think
understand how they work so that they can work on it in a reliable, responsible, and safe manner.
All the more reason why we need to worry about how many people are driving and who's driving, because we need to continue to have cars on the road that people can drive themselves, because then they'll need those skills and they'll need those people. And because if we continue to go to this automated stuff, which I'm a little against, but I also like a little bit, they will become like an electronic appliance that is plug and play and off it goes.
Unfortunately, they're going to need technicians to service them as well. We still need whether people are driving or not. We still need the vehicles to be serviced. I see where you're coming from, definitely, but I think even in the autonomous vehicle, it's still going to need a level of technical service that we don't have today, and that's going to be a real issue. And the fact that people aren't as in tune with the driving thing isn't going to make them as interested in the field either, I think.
Oh no, that's clearly the case. Well, just because people have a computer or they have a modern smartphone, that doesn't make them want to be computer engineers or software engineers.
I certainly don't.
Yes, right. But so that certainly applies to the situation. So
I like the idea of the autonomous vehicle. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great idea for transportation. But not all driving is for transportation alone, and I think that there's a huge recreational component to it. And of course, there's places that the autonomous systems aren't going to reach. They're going to be, I think, especially at first, more like railroad lines. They're going to be trunks that feed one populous area to another populous area, and all the little roads that branch off in either direction are likely to be not autonomous.
No, I'm not. I don't think so. Because they're built, instead of building the autonomy into the road, they're building the autonomy in the vehicle. So because that discussion we had back in the 60s and 70s was, we'll put these sensors in the road, and then the problem's always, well, you got to put sensors in the road. Now it's they've cameras and such things in vehicles can see the lines on the road, and at least the computer understands that you're not supposed to cross a double yellow line. Sorry, another off topic.
Well, I mean, that's part of the same thing, though, is like, in terms of the infrastructure we have, like you mentioned earlier with weather, I mean, most of the automated vehicles that they're testing right now are in like California and Texas. So, you can get inclement weather, but it's not like the rest of the country's inclement weather.
And they're wide open, flat roads.
Right. Or, bumper to bumper traffic in California. It's, not that hard to do that.
Pretty much make things autonomous in LA with a good set of bungee cords.
And they've also have done automated vehicles here in Pittsburgh, and they put a congressman into said vehicle and drove him about 30. And the vehicle itself drove 30 miles out to the airport, from Pittsburgh to the airport.
And he survived.
Oh,
damn.
Hey, now.
Now,
but the point is that it's not just so. While I think a lot of folks think that this is only happening in California, it's happening in land that is flat, is dry, and maybe it's less sparse and populous. It's moving faster than I think people realize. This is happening very, very quickly.
I think it is happening very quickly, but I also think that there's a lot. Like I think that Pennsylvania is very much like Vermont in terms of the way we have very similar weather patterns, even though ours are a little more northerly. But you have lots of very rural areas as well, like we do, where, infrastructure is not maintained all that well. So you may have roads with lines that are worn or non-existent for, a year or periods of the year, or, things like that, or dirt roads, and
swallow you.
That's true. How are they going to deal with potholes?
I think potholes they'll probably be able to do by, scanning the surface of the road to see, how smooth it is.
Right.
But, when you have things like no shoulders or no lines, that becomes a very big problem.
Well, it's still happening quickly. I sense that some people, especially that are, on the panel here today, don't think it's moving as quick as it is, but it is in fact moving. I think.
Well, the technology is coming, but I don't know that means that necessarily they'll be in widespread use all that quickly.
I certainly hope not, but we'll see. But then again, there's something to be said for after working all day and getting in your car and telling the car to take you home, and it takes you home, and you can fall asleep or take a nap or do something else.
I like that notion.
There's something to be said for that. There's also something said for, hey, I drank too much, car, take me home.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you let it go off and do its business. There's a lot of neat things with automated cars. You may not have driveways anymore because you just have your car scheduled to be at in front of your door at 8 a.m. and you get in the car and go. It drops you off in front of your office door, and then it goes to some central parking lot which is out of the way, and then you can pack a bunch of cars in there because you don't have to worry about people getting in and out of them. There's a lot of neat things that can potentially happen with the design of cities and design of housing and how people interact with their day. So there's some neat things that's the stuff I kind of like on that side, even though I'm concerned about it as a person who enjoys driving. Well, that ends in the 6th edition of the CentreSteer podcast. If you have any comments, feel free to email us or tweet us. and we'll see if we can respond back to you. We'll talk to you next month with another edition, for the 7th edition, 007. Thanks for listening.
The CentreSteer theme song, Sunset Rider by the Tritons, is available from Mivio's Music Alley. Check it out at music.mivio.com.
That wasn't very well prompted.
No, I'm sorry. My favorite.
They need to be typing away and having a teleprompter coming past them on their phones.
Yes, we have. We almost need that.
We don't get the subtle looks remotely.
Yes.
Well, that's, if we had the camera, John could be pointing and gesturing wildly like he used to.
Or if we had Mark was in the room.
Yeah, I tried.
Well, if Mark was here, I could just reach over and bitch slap him if I wanted to.
Yeah, but then John would have to
That's
cut
what
out
I'm
all
not.
the slapping sounds.